Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Thursday, May 5th, also known as Cinco de Mayo and also known as World Password Day. Which one do you want to celebrate? I know which one I want to. Okay, we've got a great lineup on today's show. We get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Tim Russell, who is the CPO over at Perforce Software. They discuss the details of Perforce's acquisition of Puppet and what it means to the company and probably to the industry at large. This is a pretty decent acquisition there, so it's putting Perforce in a very good position. So Tim and Alan talk about the acquisition and so much more. After that, Alan speaks with Jyoti Bansal, who is the CEO and co-founder of Traceable AI, and Sanjay Nagaraj, who is the CTO and co-founder of Traceable AI. They talk about Traceable's recent round of funding. I think it's $60 million in Series B funding for their API security offering. The new funding values Traceable at more than $450 million and positions the company with one of the highest value to revenue multiples in its class. Good stuff there. So what is driving all of this interest around API security interest and funding? And that is what Alan, Jyoti, and Sanjay talk about in this conversation. It's a good one, folks. After that, we have our Something Old segment. In this one, which is from the recent Secure Software Summit, which occurred in January. This one features Aaron Reinhardt, who is the co-founder and CTO over at Verica. His presentation is titled Operating Safe, Secure, and Reliable Systems with Security Chaos Engineering. We hear a lot about chaos engineering with respect to IT operations, but Aaron believes that security can also be improved greatly by using chaos engineering techniques. So he discusses how organizations can use chaos engineering to help improve their security posture and build trust and confidence by proactively identifying and navigating security unknowns. Great presentation and a lot of takeaways, so I highly encourage you to check this one out. After that, I'm back with the news headlines, and then I talk with Rick Longenecker, who is the CISO over at Open Systems, and we talk about the fact that enterprises are investing billions of dollars into AI-driven cybersecurity tools and in general are utilizing more security tools. But while these tools have vastly improved defense against modern threats, less sophisticated attack methods are being overlooked, such as social engineering. But as we all know, these attacks are still very, very highly effective for bad actors. So Rick and I talk about why maybe a simpler and scalable and repeatable approach may be more effective. So certainly AI does play a major role, but it's time for companies to maybe stop relying so much on the technology and really kind of bring that human factor back into play. It's a great conversation. After that, I've got the webinar's preview for you, and then we close things out today with the View with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard speaks with Mike Malone, who is the CEO of Small Step Labs. Small Step recently garnered $26 million in funding, and they discuss how that funding is going to be used to automate certificate management using open source tools. Good stuff there. And it's a great lineup. The entire episode today is worth your time and effort. So I do hope you'll stick around for the entirety. And we're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, welcome back, everybody. First up on today's Techstrong TV, we've got Alan speaking with Tim Russell, who is the CPO over at Perforce Software. They discuss Perforce's acquisition of Puppet, what it means for Perforce, what it means for Puppet, and what it means for the tech sector. Great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I'm really happy to be joined by my friend Tim Russell from Perforce. Tim is Chief Strategy Officer at Perforce. Tim, welcome back to Techstrong. How are you?
Very good. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me. This is an exciting time.
Yeah, it's been a busy bit. I bet you've been busy the last couple days. That's for sure. But Tim, before we jump into why you've been busy, let's talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, you're Chief Strategy Officer, and at Perforce. Look, our audience, I think, is pretty familiar with Perforce, but for maybe some folks who aren't, why don't you give us a little company background and maybe a little bit about the role you play there as CSO?
Absolutely. So a little bit about Perforce to start with for the audience that doesn't know who we are, haven't been following us. So the company's got 25-year history in DevOps, starting with our Helix Core product. But in the last 6 years, since 2016, we've been on a journey, what I call transforming Perforce into Perforce 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 by adding additional products to the portfolio that really address those large-scale challenges that enterprises have in sort of getting their arms around DevOps. You know, everything from large scale projects to multiple sites, to multiple developers, to multiple projects in one company. All these create really hard challenges for these large enterprises. And so our portfolio has been designed specifically to address those challenges. And our most recent acquisition is aligned specifically with that. And my role, I lead product management. So everything to do with where the product portfolio is going, the strategy, as well as what is our M&A strategy to build this portfolio that is, arguably the leader in the DevOps industry.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I'm doing DevOps.com now, 8.5, almost 9 years. And you're right, it's been a strange trip for me, but it's also been an interesting trip for Perforce. When I first came on, Helix was the Perforce product, right? And it was basically a repo, a repository, a GitHub type of competitor. And then it's sort of, if you can't beat them, join them, kind of encompassed using Git, right, as part of Helix, and offered, add on beyond that. But then, as you mentioned, I guess it was around 2016, Perforce went, transformed itself into much more than just a code repository type of business. And since that time, you've bought some or acquired some mobile development, other developer tools, some security, testing. I mean, assembled kind of a soup to nuts type of lineup. And congratulations to you guys for that. This next one, though, I'm going to assume it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, one you've done to date.
It is. Puppet is actually the second largest acquisition we've done in our history, and it is the 13th acquisition we've done since 2016. There was one other larger one. The one distinction here, it's the largest single product acquisition we've done. So it is, by some measures, and also their pioneering position in the DevOps industry. Everybody knows who Puppet is. They know the role that Puppet has played in advancing the state of DevOps across the industry. So really, really excited about having it as a part of the portfolio.
Absolutely. Again, to when I started DevOps.com, to many people, the DevOps space was Puppet and Chef.
Yes.
It was always Puppet and Chef, Chef and Puppet, Puppet and Chef. Of course, Chef was sold, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now, 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And now we see Puppet acquired, and that's great. Because, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, there were signals coming out of Puppet they were going to file for an IPO perhaps in the coming year or what have you. And of course, the capital markets are a little bit crazy right now. But, so this, you kind of took them out, took them off from that pack, brought them in here. So that's great. And again, I'm going to assume our whole audience knows Puppet and configuration management and what. But Puppet's also a company that over the last 6 years has kind of spread its wings a bit in terms of it's not just config management and, deployment like that. They have a wide range of functionality, again, including security and other areas. If you wouldn't mind, share a little bit with our audience about, the current Puppet functionality of their product line.
Yeah, so just a little bit of a note. So we have announced that we have intent to acquire. We've signed an agreement. We have not closed the transaction.
Yes, we should mention when is closing.
Closing is expected to be in the second quarter.
So not far. That
not
second
far.
quarter is what? The end of June is the end of second quarter, right?
Yep, correct.
So in the next 60 days.
It's imminent.
So. Yeah.
But what is exciting us about Puppet, and people have watched Puppet, they're kind of what I would consider the industry standard for infrastructure automation.
Yep.
And we're excited about the direction that they're going in addressing the needs of hybrid cloud native, as well as on-premises infrastructure from an automation and compliance perspective.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interest now in, are we compliant with whatever the industry standards are for configuration of my infrastructure, whether that's on cloud, hybrid, or on premises. And we know that, as much as there's a lot of cloud native work going on, there is still a big footprint in on-premises data centers, and there will be for some time. So addressing going back to the premise of Perforce, enterprise DevOps needs, the enterprise scale, this is another one of those places where you're spanning multiple environments and you need that automation and compliance tooling sets that can address those large scale challenges as we're going forward into modern architectures.
Absolutely. And look, don't underestimate the amount of cloud native configurations that are actually running in third-party data centers, and it's not all in the cloud, that cloud native, right? And so there is that. Now, of course, though, there are people who will tell you that cloud native and Kubernetes orchestration has taken over a lot of the automation, configuration automation, deployment, that the Puppets and Chefs of the world, and for that matter, Ansible and so forth, that was their bread and butter. But Puppet, it works with Kubernetes and all these cloud-native technologies as well.
It does, and that's the point. Is these infrastructures, especially to getting large-scale containerization, as well as hybrid configurations, some legacy applications that are integrating with containerized applications, and on that journey, there's a lot of complexity to that infrastructure configuration, deployment, sustainability, compliance, and you need tools like Puppet to manage that entire estate in a way that's efficient and consistent, right?
Agreed. So, let's get into your head a little bit, Tim. Why Puppet? Why now?
Yeah. Great question. And if you look at where Perforce is strong, if you take the entire DevOps lifecycle, Perforce's portfolio pre-Puppet was primarily concentrated in the developer parts of DevOps, planning, creation, the developer-oriented tools, testing, up into the point of release or deployment in a CI/CD environment. And our portfolio was relatively light in the operations segment. We have our Open Logic segment, which is open source for enterprise operations configurations and support for those open source packages. Think middleware, think open source operating systems, et cetera, but relatively light. And so we've always, for the last 3 or 4 years, said we need to add something in the operations segment to our portfolio. Obviously, there's lots in the operations segments for monitoring, reporting, but Puppet has always been in our sights as a really nice fit with a Perforce portfolio. Large enterprise customer base, aligned with the support and services required for large enterprises, and then a product that meets the large enterprise requirements. Fits just ideally into the principles around which the Perforce portfolio has been built. So that's why if you think of that with the whole life cycle span, now we've got a significant part of that DevOps lifecycle
Yeah,
covered.
no, it put some oomph in your ops, right?
Yes.
It makes perfect sense. Realizing that the deal's not closed yet, and these kinds of plans are not often out there. The present Puppet team, everybody coming on board.
At this point, or TBD?
We're excited about welcoming the entire Puppet team to Perforce. We've had some initial conversations, even though we're not closed, with a super, super talented team. And we're excited to welcome them to Perforce, just like we have done in every other acquisition we've done, is to welcome the team, welcome the talent, continue the direction that they've set. There's some pioneering spirits in this organization that have really been along for the entire duration of the Puppet industry influence. So we're really excited about welcoming them to, and their sites around the world are complementary to where Perforce is.
Yeah, I've been interviewing the Puppet folks for a long time, obviously, and there are some really fine people there. Most of all, my friend Nigel Kirsten over in the UK.
Nigel, yes.
Nigel's a rock star.
Absolutely a joy to
absolutely
speak with
love him.
Yes, yeah. I completely agree.
He's just a joy. He is a really nice guy. There's more, though. A lot of the team there, it's really bright, good people.
Yes.
Speaking of Nigel, what about, one of my favorite things in talking to the Puppet folks is the annual DevOps survey, right? Their State of DevOps survey. I love it. I'm going to assume you guys are looking forward to continuing that.
Absolutely, and potentially even expanding the scope as we get into this deeper. It's like now we have more topics to cover. DevOps is obviously changing in good ways across the industry. And so super excited to have that as a part of the acquisition that comes along with Puppet and the work that they've done, groundwork that they've done over the past several years. This is an exciting part of I think they have, I forget how many years now, 8, 9, 10 years.
Yes. But that hit, that data source of these surveys over that period of time is pretty amazing too. So is this it? Is is Perforce now complete, you think, Tim, or you guys still looking?
Great question. We're always looking to expand the portfolio. We know there's other places that we could add to the DevOps portfolio, address additional places where we don't currently have products that fit. And I don't want to go through all of them and give away my secrets, but there's a number of places that we'll continue to look for additional companies to add to the portfolio. And this is who we are. 13 acquisitions in 6 years shows who Perforce is.
Absolutely. Want to ask a question on behalf of the audience. So this is great, right? We realize the deal's not closed yet. In terms of integrating, though, Puppet into some of the Perforce platforms, or vice versa, right? Puppet itself is a platform in many ways.
Yep. Integrating
some of the Perforce capabilities in there. Is there a plan? Anything you could talk about?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I get that question all the time. And it's not just about the most recent acquisition, but think about all of the pieces of our portfolio. And I answer it one way. We integrate where it delivers customer value, and customer value to multiple customers. So looking at the trends, looking at what customers are trying to do in DevOps, and then building those integrations across products. A great example, you've seen that we've acquired BlazeMeter from Broadcom, and that was the most recent. And then our Perfecto, these are both testing platforms, right?
Yep.
And so we're looking at ways of bringing those products together because it's all part of testing at scale, testing large scale web and mobile applications. So those are places where we look for delivering more customer value. In the case of Puppet, we'll look at how does it work with our OpenLogic brand and the products that we have in that segment. So it'll be in a place where customers get value, and we don't want to just do integration to make it look like one big platform from one company.
Absolutely. The other thing to remember, we do a show called DevOps Unbound, video series every other week, about 45 minutes. And we did one, we just recorded it yesterday on testing. And the thing to remember, and it applies to testing, but it applies to so much in our space today, Tim, is that, testing is a nice little word, whatever it is, 7, 8 letters. But the scope of what qualifies as testing today, right? Whether we're talking about unit testing, security testing, scalability testing, performance testing, UI kind of testing, usability testing.
I mean, there's
accessibility testing.
Accessibility, another.
It's wider than my hands go in this screen, right?
Yes.
And so it's very hard to just say, okay, yeah, we're going to put all the testing together. There's different people doing different tests.
There are.
Right? There are developers who are doing tests. There are testers who are doing tests. There's security people doing tests. You can't just say...
There are operations people doing tests.
Yeah. You can't just say, well, it's all testing. We'll put it together. What the heck? Right? And it don't work like that. You got to... People, it's all about the tools, man, right? It's the right tool for the job.
And it's all about scales. Because we're in a digital world now, the need for quality to maintain businesses and the reputation of businesses depends on how you test your web and mobile apps. That is your front door. You're not painting the front door anymore. You're building a digital presence. And we're seeing that in our current testing businesses. The demand and the growth rates in our testing businesses is off the charts. And it's because of this demand for quality at scale. And everybody's distributed now. Even in the post-COVID world, people are working in a distributed way. You need web and mobile testing platforms that are delivered via SaaS models. And we're excited. I mean, the testing space and now the operation space are really two highlights in the portfolio.
Good stuff. Hey, Tim, any particular place on the Perforce site that people can kind of stay abreast of what's going on here?
Yeah, I would recommend going to perforce.com, our main site, and you can get all the latest news. There's links to the acquisition announcements, the plans that we have there, webinar resources for more details on what Puppet's doing, as well as the rest of the portfolio. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Tim, congratulations. This is a really nice acquisition for Perforce, right? It's, as you said, it really fills the ops side of the ledger for you here. I'm interested and hopeful and can't wait to see what turns out here. So keep up the great work. Congratulations. And come back and see us soon. Don't wait till every time you buy someone to come on. Just come on, keep us posted.
Let's do that, Alan. We'll keep you posted as the acquisition gets closed and we move into more the delivery mode. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure to have you on, Tim. Be well. Tim Russell, Chief Strategy Officer, Perforce, on their recent acquisition of Puppet and everything else going on at Perforce. Exciting times. We're going to take a break here. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, Alan is speaking with Jyoti Bansal, who's the CEO and co-founder over Traceable AI, and Sanjay Nagaraj, who is the CTO and co-founder over Traceable AI. They discuss Traceable's recent round of funding, $60 million. As you know, Traceable AI has an application or an API security platform, and with this recent round of funding, they're now valued at more than $450 $50 million, and it actually positions the company with one of the highest value to revenue multiples in its class. So why the interest around API security? Well, that is one of the many questions that Alan poses, and Jyoti and Sanjay answer. It is a great conversation, and it's a really, really fascinating technology as well. So definitely worth your time to listen to. So let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another Techstrong TV segment. Really happy to be joined by two gentlemen they really need no introduction. They've been on our show many times. The companies they've founded and helped run have done tremendous things. You probably use them. Their latest one is also just an up-and-comer we're going to hear more about. Let me introduce you to Jyoti Bansal and Sanjay Nagaraj. Close?
Got it right.
Okay.
Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks. Excuse my terrible pronunciation. Sometimes I try to read them from what's up on there, and it's a big monitor, but my eyes aren't what they were. So, guys, thank you for joining us. Just by way of introduction, Jyoti and Sanjay are respectively the CEO, and is it CTO, VP Engineering, Sanjay?
Yep.
Of Traceable.ai, one of the leaders in the API security space. Of course, both of these gentlemen, though, were actually when I first launched DevOps.com, which is 8 years ago now, one of our very first sponsors was Jyoti's company, and AppDynamics, which was subsequently acquired by Cisco. And Sanjay, you were also at AppDynamics, correct?
Yes.
You engineering, right? Engineering.
Yes.
And then, of course, after AppDynamics, Jyoti started the company Harness, one of the leaders in the CI/CD space. And because he just didn't have enough to do, Jyoti and Sanjay got together and started Traceable AI as well. So congratulations on that. Today we're going to talk Traceable, though, guys, if it's okay. Jyoti, you're the CEO. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of our audience knows Traceable, but maybe there's some who don't or aren't sure. Why don't we start off with what Traceable is, and then let's jump into today's news.
Yeah, definitely. So, the idea behind Traceable is to secure your APIs. Everything that we are doing now, the cloud native architectures, the distributed systems, move to microservices, serverless, everything in a modern application architecture is API oriented, right? So then APIs are your doors and windows to all the code. And we really think that's where the next major frontier of cybersecurity is. And you can see some of the major attacks that are happening, the sophisticated attacks that are happening are at the application and primarily at the API layer. If you look at the evolution of cybersecurity, you have the securing the networks, which you have to do the first thing. Then you secure the infrastructure, your servers and containers as the second thing. But then the problem shifts to how do you secure the applications, which are really fronted by the APIs. And we thought APIs are just not being protected the right ways. And that's why we wanted to rethink, how you should do API security. And, starting with how do you, first of all, know what all the APIs are, discover all the APIs, understand, the risk associated with every API. Then you want to protect these APIs against kind of the known kind of attacks, but also the unknown attacks, which are the majority of attacks that happens on APIs through manipulation of the business logic of the APIs. And then provide an analytics platform for the developers and the security ops teams both to kind of align on how do you understand the usage of APIs and how can you proactively secure them better. So that's what we are doing at Traceable, rethinking how you secure APIs and bringing this next generation API security mindset to the market.
Excellent. I mean, my take on it, Sanjay, you're CTO, correct me or supplement, if you will. Before cloud native was cool, right? I remember going to a CA World 7 years ago, 6 years ago, and they spoke about this thing called the API-driven economy, right? That APIs were driving this high level of integration at application layers that allowed all of these great kind of integrations to happen. and that was kind of really driving a whole economy. And that was great, right? It made put APIs on the map. It made APIs important. But then we had the whole cloud native Kubernetes thing, right? Which not only did you now have one application talking to another or integrating or passing data, but you had the whole birth of sort of microservices architecture, if you will, where within an application, the disparate parts of that application, whether it be in different containers or what have you, they spoke via API, so sort of internal versus external, right? So now you had a whole nother level of APIs. You put those together and you have like a critical mass of API issues. Then on top of that, our whole app security infrastructure, not our whole, but a good chunk of our app security infrastructure was built on this premise of sort of WAFs, right? Web application firewalls. That was much like a regular firewall, except now, it's in the web application. It's looking at that traffic and blocking. Some block smarter, some don't block so smart. They're relatively rudimentary. But that whole world of this API communication, both internally and externally, was kind of bypassing the WAF, which kind of made that useless in many ways, right? For this kind of communication. Something had to give there, right? We had this major hole that, and API security as a result has sprung up. It's a huge problem, and it grows bigger every time we do more microservices. And we have more service mesh where all these things can talk to each other. It just makes it more complicated. Now we have SBOMs as well. We got to know third-party bill of materials, right?
Correct.
I mean, to me, this is one of the major, not problems, but one of the major frontiers that we face in app security today.
Correct. And I totally agree. So if you look at APIs, there are multiple variants, as you're saying. There is the edge or the external APIs that was as an external web traffic. Okay, I'm going to protect it with a WAF. There are issues with protecting with just a WAF because it's all about layered security and how you can actually think about APIs differently. But then not only that, as you were saying, there are microservices which are exposing these internal APIs. And in a lot of these cases, there are APIs that are getting exposed to your mobile applications, but also B2B APIs, which are getting exposed to your B2B customers, right? And how do you look at all of those things holistically? Not only that, you as an application, you're accessing third-party APIs that you're using, where you're sending and receiving data from, right? So holistically, how do you understand all of these APIs, which Jyoti was talking about, the discovery of these internal, external APIs, the third-party APIs? But not only that, how are you understanding this from your pre-production environment all the way into your production environment? Because you have to shift left on some of these things and protect right, because a lot of these APIs are going to get exposed one way or another. It's not just about understanding those APIs, but you need to understand the data that's flowing through those APIs. And that's what Traceable is set out to do and has been working over the last 3 years to invest further into that, is not only just discovering the data, tying them back to the runtime protection aspects of it against all of the business logic type of attacks, which you're seeing in the papers every other day now.
So Jyoti, look, you're a smart guy. You've had tremendous success, right, in business. As you sit here today, when you and Sanjay originally sort of thought about Traceable API, did you envision them? It seems to me this is mission creep, right? The mission is what was back then 3-4 years ago versus what you got to do now for API security. It just seems like there's so much more to it, right? This isn't simple. There's a lot to it. Did you envision that it would go that way, or you just, this is the world, right?
I always think of what is the broader mission that we are going after. So when we started Traceable, and Traceable is a new company we started right before COVID. The idea there was that the whole world is going to run on code. That's no doubt about it. And someone has to make sure that the code is protected in the inside all the time. So, and that's how we look at, if you want to protect the code, APIs are really the first part of it, because that's where everything comes in. And so our thesis is simple, like, can we watch every single API call and the code that's running behind it? And, the second is, can we learn the intended behavior that developers had for those APIs? Like, what did the developers think those APIs would be used for? What data will be transferred? What people would what kind of logic people would execute on those APIs, etc. Right? We learn that through a very powerful AI engine. And then, if someone is trying to use the API in a way that the developers didn't intend it to be used, then you stop it. So we think of it in a very simple mission, like, if the world is going to run on trillions of lines of code and like billions and billions of lines of APIs, we watch all of those, we learn the normal intended behavior, and we stop it when someone is doing something strange. And it's needed, right? So it's no surprise that we are seeing this kind of a huge growth in the market. We are seeing the API security as a very rapidly emerging category. We are seeing very strong customer traction. And what we also found was like our approach of instrumenting and tracing every single API call, and using this use of very powerful AI model around it. That's been very differentiating in the market, right? So it's like, which is the, if you look at the fundamentally, what we're doing is you're watching the calls and you're bringing them all together into what we call a trace data lake. So all of them are coming into a trace data lake, and the trace data lake allows us to build really powerful AI that allows us to go and detect and stop all kind of attacks, like the most sophisticated API attacks that you can that you can imagine. And we're definitely seeing a lot of traction and validation of that approach in the market as well. And definitely that's why we were able to attract such a strong investor interest in our Series B.
And that brings up kind of what we wanted to talk about today, right? You guys recently announced, or just announced, a round of investment. Jody, again, you're the CEO. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Why don't you share with our audience?
Yes, so we are announcing, $60 million of Series B financing for the company, and this financing is led by IVP, which is one of very strong growth stage venture firms that have been investor in AppDynamics and Harness as well, and Tiger Global, one of the well-known large,
probably the biggest
firms. Yes, the biggest, and then also from the two early investors, Unusual Ventures and my studio, Big Labs, are also investing in this round. So we are very excited. Like this, $60 million of new financing. It's a great validation for what we have accomplished, but also where we are going for the next few years. It allows us to continue to invest in R&D and our go-to-market expansion as well.
So again, I'm going to defer to your expertise and smart. I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders on here over the last couple of months who've raised sometimes outrageous amounts of money. I mean, it's easy to just throw around 200 here, 400 here, just outrageous amounts of money that, as an entrepreneur who's done venture-backed companies since 1997, I'm like, my head spins when I hear some of these numbers. But like, part of me says, who the heck, what do you do with $300 or $400 million? Maybe you buy out your existing investors, right, and take them out of the cap table, or you make a distribution to some early founders, co-founders, what have you, take them off the sheet. But do you really use that money to make the company, the product, better?
Yeah,
right?
I think
the service, if it's not. 60 seems like that's a number I get my head around, right? We could use that to hire marketing, sales, engineering, expand to Asia Pac. You know what I mean? That's what I grew up with. That's kind of what I'm used to. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. Like, I'm a big believer in, like, you raise capital for the sake of an outcome, which is to build your business, build your company. Raising capital is not the outcome. That's just a means to the end that you're going for. So, I've never raised capital more than you need, right? So, like, normally when you raise capital, you look for, like, what your needs for the next somewhere around 18 months, maybe 24 months. And, that's how I always look at, like, it doesn't matter what's happening in the market. Sometimes the markets are going extremely bullish. Sometimes the markets are getting depressed, which is where they are today. But to me, it doesn't really matter. It's really what we look for. Let's continue to build up the best products in the market. Let's continue to execute on sales and marketing. Let's continue to make our customers very happy and successful. And the funding is really, how do we go to the next 18 months, next 24 months, and whatever we need, we'll do that. So many times last year people will ask us last year the market was very crazy and bullish, right? People would, this bullish crazy market, why don't you raise funding now? And we didn't really need to. Now we look at, okay, now it's a good time for us to go to the next level, and we are ready to for the next 18, 24 months, and that's how we have looked at it. That's how I've done it. At AppDynamics, at my second company, Harness, that's what we do here. Funding is really to build our business, and we don't lose the fundamentals. A lot of times people get very bound up in especially when you are in the startup, Silicon Valley, VC world, around the funding as the goal is it means the building the business is the goal, and we make sure that we don't get too wound up on it.
Yeah. I think that's a great lesson, especially for our audience. You have entrepreneurs out here, maybe looking to raise money, startups. Raise what you need. The win isn't how much you raise. The win is using the money you raise to build a great company.
Yeah, it's I have this rule, sometimes I see resumes of people applying and they put their accomplishment that I raised $50 million for this company. That's their primary accomplishment. And to me, I consider them as a disqualifier. It's what did you do with the money should be your accessibility, not
raising the money.
Really not really an accomplishment, right? So that's it's important that we make addressable. We are very focused on our accomplishment is to build the best products, execute in the market and make customers successful. Everything comes from there.
Excellent. So Sanjay, let me throw it right back at you then. What are you going to do with the money to make it more valuable?
Yeah, no, as Jyoti said, I think the goal, just to kind of sum it up a little bit differently, right? It's about building the business responsibly, which Jyoti has talked about for years, and that's what Traceable is doing. So the investment, as Jyoti said, is how do we build the best product? How do we continue to build the best product? That's where some of the investment is going to go. How do we continue the customer obsession that we have to make sure we are serving the customers well? So expanding our customer success aspects of it. That's where the money is going to go. Then, of course, a lot into expanding from a sales and marketing perspective as we take the business to the next level, right? So that's where some of the investment is going to go into.
So we're almost out of time, guys. I apologize. When do you think we might see new product or some new feature set, coming as a result of this raise and expanding staff, etc.?
No pressure, Sanjay.
We are constantly expanding. It's not, as I said, many times people think of, now that we got this funding, now we're going to invest more in engineering. We think of it the inverse. We're already investing in engineering, and we have a plan. We keep investing in a certain way, and we keep building products. But obviously, the funding gives us a runway for next almost couple of years to continue to invest even more aggressively. And we have a sizable engineering investment. We'll continue to grow that. A lot of exciting capabilities coming in. We are definitely doubling down on how we think of API fraud, data exfiltration, the more advanced kind of abuse that's happening. We are looking pretty deeply and shipping out a lot of capabilities around understanding the data flow, the sensitive data flow between your incoming APIs, internal APIs, outgoing APIs. We are looking to also see how can we complete the sort of the SDLC lifecycle on it, where we are detecting and securing the APIs in production, but using that data and to bring that into the pre-production testing lifecycle, integrated in CI/CD. So definitely a lot of innovations on multiple fronts that will continue to bring out in the market over the next year.
I mean, certainly, I think people are learning there are many facets to this API security puzzle, right? It's not simple. There are, Jyoti, you just hit 5 of them probably, off the top of your head. but there's a lot to it. Well, guys, we're about out of time, though. But, hey, man, congratulations on the money raise. We are excited. We're excited to see developments in this whole space. We're especially excited to see, Traceable and Sanjay and Jody, what you guys do with the company. We're expecting big things, right? Best of luck. Keep us posted and keep up the great work. All right. We're here on Techstrong. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got something old. This is from the recent Secure Software Summit it's a virtual event that we held in January. This is a presentation by Aaron Reinhardt, who is the co-founder and CTO at Verica. His presentation is titled Operating Safe, Secure, and Reliable Systems with Security Chaos Engineering. Discusses how the concept of chaos engineering can be applied to security to help engineering build trust and confidence by proactively identifying and navigating security unknowns. It's a really, really interesting concept that bringing chaos engineering into the cybersecurity realm, and I expect a lot of organizations will derive a lot of value from it. So it's a great presentation and a lot to think about. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hello and welcome to the Secure Software Summit. I'd like to first, my name is Aaron Reinhardt. I'll be your speaker for this session on the new playbook for operating safe, secure, and reliable systems with security chaos engineering. I'd like to first off thank the organizers of the conference, Chetan, Shift Left, Alan Jenkins, and Techstrong Media. This is really an exciting event for a remote event. What a great lineup of speakers. You got Shannon Leeds, Josh Corman, Vandana Verma, Jonathan Schneider, and a whole list of other amazing speakers. So I'm really excited to be a part of this. Without further ado, I will kick off my session. If you look at the bottom of this slide here, you'll see @Aaron Reinhardt. That's my Twitter. My DMs are open. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to follow up, or happy to do that. So let's dive in. So in terms of things we're going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about the nature of complexity in modern software. I'm going to talk about what is this thing called chaos engineering. I'm going to talk about chaos engineering and its applications to cybersecurity as well. I'm going to talk about some use cases you can apply it to. I'm going to walk through a very simple experiment framework. These are for authoring or writing security chaos experiments. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to use an example of that via an open source tool I wrote 4.5 years ago called Chaos Slinger. So a little bit about me. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called Verica. I co-founded Verica with the creator of chaos engineering at Netflix, Casey Rosenthal. Let's say I'm the former chief security architect at United Health Group. That's where I started pioneering sort of the application of Netflix's chaos engineering to cybersecurity. I have a background in actually safety and reliability engineering at NASA, as well as Department of Defense. I'm a frequent speaker and author on chaos engineering and security. I'm the O'Reilly author on security chaos engineering and the main body of knowledge. much for chaos engineering. I wrote the chapter on security chaos engineering, as well as I'm the co-author on the O'Reilly Security Chaos Engineering Report with Kelly Shortridge. Kelly and I are currently writing another, the actual full version of this book, like this one right now, which will come out later this year. For the first 500 participants to this session, there will be a link at the very end of this slide deck, bit.ly, where you can go register to get a free copy, printed copy shipped to you of the Security Chaos Engineering Report. So stay tuned for that. What's interesting is in these pictures you see on the right-hand side, on the very bottom is actually the week after we released the first open source tool that applied Netflix's chaos engineering to security. And that's the group, that's the chaos engineering folks and the security folks. A very interesting day for me, being able to explain chaos engineering and how it's applied to security to the Netflix team. So it was a great day. So let's get started with the material. The problem is that outages, breaches, and incidents seem to be becoming more and more often and larger in scope and scale, and we don't seem to be getting better at the problem. So why is this? I mean, what are we doing wrong? Well, the problem is our systems have evolved beyond a human ability to mentally model their behavior. The size, scale, speed, and complexity of modern software is challenging. If you look at this picture on the left here, you'll see a bunch of dots and lines connecting them. Well, each dot is actually a microservice. And remember, microservices are not independent, they're interdependent. So they're dependent upon each other. And so, our systems are quickly evolving into becoming larger and harder to model their behavior post-deployment. So where does this complexity seem to be coming from? Well, you'll see here things like DevOps, continuous delivery, service meshes, circuit breakers, microservices, CI/CD, pipelines, cloud computing. All these. You said, Aaron. Well, yeah, but these capabilities are helping us deliver value to market faster via product to customer. Well, that's true, but it's also increasing the amount of complexity that we're having to deal with post-deployment. So newsflash, you haven't figured out already, software has officially taken over. If you look on the right here, that's the new OSI stack. It's software. And that's part of the problem is the adoption and growth of software within our systems and the nature of the flexibility of and ease of changing software has increased the amount of changes we're able to make to the system, which is also directly related to the amount of complexity we see as a result. So adding on to that, software only ever increases in complexity. It will never decrease in complexity. It's because if you let's say you have a complex set of software and say, oh, I want to make my system, my software less complex. Well, what do you have to do that if you want to make it simple? You have to change it. Well, the process of actually making the change actually increases complexity. Really, so the theory is really you're kind of just moving complexity around. You're not actually simplifying anything. So then that's what we're really trying to do when it comes to chaos engineering. Chaos engineering is not about chaos. It's not about breaking things in production. That all sounds cool, right? But that's not what it's about. It's actually a much more practical instrumentation technique. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to navigate the already complex systems and chaos we're dealing with through asking the computer a series of questions. So, for example, consider a legacy system at your company where you work, or company you have worked in the past. I mean, let's something like a mainframe. I mean, how did our legacy systems typically are, their legacy typically means business critical. That's what that means, or else we would have gotten rid of the legacy system. We would have refactored or redesigned it. But they're somewhat known as being somewhat stable. They're fairly known as being somewhat documented. Engineers feel confident and competent in how the system operates and how to, and where its weak points are and how to improve it. But the question is, was the system always that way, right? And the answer is no, it wasn't, right? Like when we originally designed the system, we learned that with the difference between what the system how it actually operated versus how we thought it operated through a series of unforeseen surprises. If it wasn't a surprise, we would have fixed it. Okay, so we learned that the system worked differently than we thought through a series of outages, incidents, and that type of behavior. And that's we learned what we didn't know, and then we went back, recalibrated, and remediated the system, and then we continued that process. The problem with that way of working is that it often leads to pain, right? Pain in terms of the customer having pain in terms of an operating experience, or engineers, people operating the system having to encounter those types of events during, high caliber business outcome type of scenarios. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can think of chaos engineering as a proactive way of introducing conditions into the system to try to ensure the system can still do what it's supposed to do when it incurs those events. So, for example, things like retry logic, or failovers, or security detective or preventative type of measures. And we design them for a point in time based upon some kind of trigger, some kind of event, some kind of traffic flood, or some kind of volume in customer requests, or some kind of misconfiguration, or some kind of, we design these mechanisms for those types of events. What happens is engineers today, because of software, and they kind of always have even before software, they're constantly in there changing the system. They're in there changing the system a lot. So when we originally designed the conditions based upon our knowledge of the system, the system has actually changed a lot since we originally designed that retry logic, or that failover logic, or that detective measure, right? And what happens is when those conditions or those triggers actually occur within a system, are those mechanisms we designed may not perform as well as we think they are supposed to. So chaos engineering, what we're doing is we're proactively, before there's a problem, right? We're proactively saying, hey, computer, under the conditions that you're designed to perform under, do you perform the way you're supposed to? We do that by introducing the conditions themselves in a controlled manner, considering things like blast radius and there's a whole series of things you consider when you do these experiments. Highly recommend you picking up either one of these books. They described it very well on how to approach it. We introduce them in a controlled manner to ensure they're ready to meet the demands of that we originally designed the system to meet. So we also forget that systems engineering is a very messy exercise. It's we often forget, I believe, it's because our brains have to simplify complex things in order to create order and organize them in order to synthesize outcomes, results, and solutions. And so, for example, in the beginning of a systems lifecycle, we love to think the system looks like this, right? We have a plan. We know how much time we have. We always need more time for software, right? We have the resources, we have our code repositories, we got our Docker images, we've got, our different environments, our lower environments, our upper environments, staging, prod, QA, right? And then, of course, we have that nice 3D diagram of our AWS instance that we're going to deploy to, right? The reality of it is, actually, our system never looks like this. It never is this simple, and it never, we just love to believe it is. So what happens is just quickly after the system goes live, we start learning about how the system actually operates through a series of unforeseen events, right? Well, after first week, marketing comes down and says, "Oh, we got the pricing wrong. We need to refactor the pricing module," or are there there's an outage on the payments API with a hard-coded token, right? Or of course we go back and fix that, right? We don't go from war room to war room to war room to war room, right? We actually remediate things, right? And we come back and fix it. Sure. But then there's an audit, a regulatory audit, or there's a customer audit, or it's always DNS, right? There's an outage on DNS. The point here is that our system slowly evolves into a state that we really don't understand it anymore. It's we're learning. The thing is what we have to do is build these tool sets and the skill sets to adopt and evolve with the system as the systems, our understanding of the system and the context around it evolves. So in the end, our systems have become more complex and messy than we originally remember them being. So what does this stuff have to do with security? I'm getting to it. So cybersecurity is a context-dependent discipline. So I've been a software engineer most of my career before I got into security. I've been kind of done every discipline, but software engineer most of my career. So as a software engineer, my job is to deliver, value via product via software to the customer, right? So I'm constantly in there trying to deliver on business requirements for the product via software, constantly change it. So I need the flexibility and convenience to change what I need to change in order to figure out how to deliver what the business has asked me to deliver for the product, right? I'm not even sure to remember what it's like to be a software engineer. I'm not even sure I can do this. Yeah, I have to figure it out, right? That's the fun part of actually software. You got to figure it out, right? Well, I'm in there trying to figure it out, right? I'm constantly, remember, there's more than just one software engineer. So lots of them. We're in there constantly changing the system, right? We need that flexibility and convenience to change it. We don't know exactly what permissions we need yet, or the exact security setup yet, because we're still designing, right? Well, so we're constantly changing. We're moving towards business value. That's our metric. We're trying to deliver product via software and value to the customer, right? Well, security is a context-dependent discipline. So we must know what we're trying to secure in order to know what we need to secure about it. So by default, we're forced into a staple understanding of something in order to understand what needs to be built around the security. The context is somewhat staple, right? So what happens is we go forth, we'll build some sort of detective, preventative, or some sort of security mechanism based upon that context. But we'll remember that the system is constantly changing. What happens? You start to get, you don't know there's a problem or the security no longer works until it no longer works, right? And that's kind of the problem of today, right? Is that there's this drift issue between, engineers constantly changing the system and the lack of recalibration between the system and the security mechanisms that we've designed for it. And a lot of times we don't know there's a problem until there is a problem, like there's some sort of log event or some sort of alert or something can't connect to something or download a manifest. Well, it's important to recognize that security is context dependent. So chaos engineering and security chaos engineering, where does it fit in terms of the world of instrumentation? Well, so Casey and myself like to sort of break down instrumentation into sort of two domains. There's testing and experimentation. So testing would be the verification or validation of something you already know to be true or false. It's a binary thing. We know what we're looking for before we go looking for it, right? So in our world, that could be a CVE, an attack pattern, a signature, those sorts of things, right? Well, in the world of experimentation, we're trying to derive new information that we previously did not know. Things about the unknown kind of behavior, trying to drive a better understanding and provide that context back to the people designing this and delivering the system. So how do we typically discover when our security measures fail? Well, typically we discover when security fails during a security incident. Some sort of security incident is launched as a result of either some sort of footstep in the sand, meaning a log event, a stack trace, or some kind of alert, some observability types of events that tell us what's going on inside the system through its external outputs. But the problem is, by the time we usually discover the security incident, it's kind of already too late in the life cycle to really do a whole lot about it. We need to be more proactive, at least in terms of the things we can control about the system. So what happens during a security incident? Well, in short, people freak out. Okay. This is what happens, right? Is that especially software engineers, like, I knew I shouldn't have pushed that code, right? I knew there's an issue with that. Or, I knew I should have been up at 3 a.m. making changes, right? Like this is not a good learning environment, right? So this is not where we do chaos engineering. The purpose of chaos engineering is to proactively verify the system does what it's supposed to do and learn if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, learn about that additional context we're unaware of, and use that context to turn around and build a better and more reliable system. So we do chaos engineering here. When there is no active war room, there is no active problem. We do it to proactively verify that before we need these important critical system capabilities to function, that they can do what they need to do. We do that through a series of experiments and experimentation. So in the end, this environment's much easier to learn under. There's less cognitive load. People are not worried about the blame, name, shame game. Not worried about being blamed for causing the incidents and being named to their boss, and worried about losing their jobs, right? Because honestly, that's what goes through a lot of people's heads. If you're in security, or even if you're not, and you listen to this talk, you've probably been in this situation before. It all happens to all of us, right? But you'll remember that this environment here is not a very comfortable environment to be learning from, because you're not really focused on, learning. You're focused on get that thing back up and running. We're losing money. That's the issue, right? So let's not be doing our chaos engineering here. We do it here, okay? Chaos engineering. So, the Netflix definition of chaos engineering is a discipline of experimentation on distributed systems in order to build confidence. That's key, build confidence in the system's ability to withstand turbulent conditions. Or another way of saying it, it's idea or practice of proactively introducing turbulent conditions into the system to try to determine the conditions by which the system will fail before it actually fails. For chaos engineering, it's really about building trust and confidence. So we're not creating chaos. Systems are already chaotic. We're trying to establish order, and that order helps us build our confidence and the trust in what we're doing. Currently, there are 3 publications on chaos engineering. I talked about that earlier. There's an original Netflix report similar to this version of the book from O'Reilly that was written by Casey, Nora, and the rest, and Lauren and the other folks on the Netflix team. And then there's going to be the next book in this iteration is the follow-on book from Kelly and I. So security chaos engineering, or the application of chaos engineering and the practice of chaos engineering to cybersecurity. I love to start off a good talk on security chaos engineering, talking about my 2 favorite things that we don't believe in engineering. So as an engineer, we don't believe in 2 things. We don't believe in hope. We don't believe in luck. I mean, we believe in data, instrumentation. We believe in feedback. We believe like context, and does those help us understand what didn't work or what did work, so we can improve the system and get better at what we do. So things like hope. I mean, it's not an effective strategy. I mean, it worked in Star Wars, but it doesn't work for us. So what we're trying to do is kind of proactively understand our system and build confidence in that, but also understand where the security gaps are, that a divergence might be occurring before an adversary has a chance to take advantage of it, of the fact that we have a gap and we just can't see it. So here's some use cases you can apply security chaos engineering to. I'm finding almost every day that somebody's applying it in a different way, but some of the main areas where people get a lot of value from doing it are security control validation. A lot of this is like architecture type of validation, verifying that security controls work the way they're supposed to, when they're supposed to, they're placed correctly, they're effective, they trigger under the right conditions. And that's kind of where I started doing it. Incident response is also a great use case. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Security observability, understanding how effective your system observability, things like your monitoring, your alerting, are at detecting certain types of events. So that's key. And then compliance monitoring. Every chaos experiment, whether it's security or availability based, has compliance values. So make sure you're keeping that in a high output, in a high integrity way, hashing it, whatever, and labeling it with the right control framework. You get basically free auditable artifacts. So I would keep that, because basically you're proving whether the technology worked the way it's supposed to, and that's great. That's great information. So instant response. Well, the problem with the instant response is that it's a response, and that's the nature of the problem with the process. And so security incidents are somewhat subjective. No matter how many people you have, or how many fancy security controls you have, we really don't know much about what's happening or what's going to happen. Right? You don't know who's trying to do it, what they're trying to do to get in, where they're coming from, how they're doing it, or why they're even doing it. Right? I remember at my former employer, we were the largest healthcare companies in the world. We spent a lot of money and time and effort in human beings. I mean, more than most companies that I've come across in trying to be good at instant response and cybersecurity. And it's just hard. You don't know if the technologies put in place are actually effective until they meet the challenge that they were designed for, which is kind of the problem. You're waiting for that event to occur to know how effective it is at those types of situations. And furthermore, the security response teams are also, it's hard to measure how effective they are in those situations until the events occur. So what chaos engineering, what we do is we're proactively introducing the signal instead of waiting for something to happen and try to figure out, did we have the right log event? Did we have the right context to figure out where that came from? Did, you might not be getting logging from some control because somebody might have updated it to a new version and forgot to set the logging configurations to the correct parameters. Stuff like that happens, right? Like the thing is like you don't want to find that out during an active problem, right? So with chaos engineering, we're not guessing when it started. We actually introduced the condition and the signal in the system. We can see how effective our run books were, or we see how if we have the right number of people on call, if we're effective, if our observability events from our firewalls or from our security controls were good, gave us good information to quickly determine what was happening, where it was happening, that sort of information. So there's a lot of value in that. So on the Chaos Slinger. So Chaos Slinger was the first ever application to Netflix's Chaos Engineering to cybersecurity. Netflix did not do Chaos Engineering for cybersecurity prior to this. This was the first ever application of it. And I'll talk a little bit about what Chaos Slinger does. Oh, yeah. So let me just back up here. So Chaos Slinger, just a little bit about it. I realize I'm not going too far in depth into this, but you can go out to the GitHub repo for Chaos Slinger. It's a deprecated repo. It's from United Health Group repo. When I left United Health Group, it's their open source project. But it still represents a good framework for writing experiments. There's three different functions, Lambda functions, in order to write an experiment. There's generator, there's slinger, and there's tracker. So generator actually does target acquisition. It defines where you're going to actually do the chaos. Slinger actually introduces the change. And in the example I'm going to explain next, it actually opened or closes a port that wasn't open or closed to try to introduce a misconfigured type of port condition change into an EC2 security group. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then tracker tracks the output of the experiment and reports into Slack so it can be remediated and followed. And that's, you can look up more information there or pick up the Security Chaos Engineering report or fill out the form at the very end of this presentation. You'll be able to get a free copy sent to you, printed copy sent to you. All right, so the primary experiment we went with when we released Chaos Slinger to the open source world, we went a good example. We had several experiments that we used at United Health Group with sort of an internal repo of experiments. We had a public one, but we needed to make an experiment that we could make public that a lot of people could understand. So no matter whether you're a firewall engineer, a network engineer, a software engineer, whatever function you just still are, an executive, you can kind of understand what a misconfigured port is. We've been solving for that problem for a long time, and it still remains to be still a problem. Keeps remanifesting itself in different new technology evolutions. But it happens for lots of reasons. It could be that someone submitted a ticket wrong. It could be that an engineer didn't understand network flow. It could be that somebody applied the change incorrectly. For lots of reasons, it happens, right? Misconfigured, unauthorized port changes happen all the time. Well, we were at when I was at United Health Group, we were very new to AWS at the time, and we had a lot of confidence in the fact that we believed in our firewalls would detect. So our belief was that our firewalls immediately detect and block this kind of thing and be a non-issue. So okay, well, let's design an experiment that does this, right? So during business hours, we would sort of randomly select a bunch amongst a opt-in tag. So the opt-in tag was an AWS reference tag for whether something could be subjected to chaos engineering or not. For example, you might not want to opt in the edge of your network on AWS to open or closing a port. So anyway, so it would select amongst that group of tags, and it would either select a security group and it would either open or close a port that wasn't already open or closed. So immediately what we found out, we started doing this on our AWS instances. Remember, we were new to AWS at the time, but we started finding out our firewalls only detected that behavior about 60% of the time. So that was an eye-opening experience. So we learned it was a drift issue, a configuration drift issue between our non-commercial and our commercial software instances, and we fixed it. So remember, it was proactive. We fixed it proactively. There was no issue. There was no war room, right? The second thing we learned is our cloud-native configuration management tool caught and blocked it every time. So something we barely were paying for, didn't even know how effective it really was caught and blocking it every time. The third thing we expected is that we didn't really have a SIEM at the time. We sort of had a security big data lake, and we sort of homegrown. And I wasn't confident that it would actually trigger an alert and it would be effective at correlating the log data and alerting the SOC. But actually did, so that worked better than we thought. The problem was when they so that was the third thing we learned. But when the SOC actually got the alert, they couldn't tell which AWS instance it came from. Now you're like, Aaron, you can map back the IP address and figure out where it came from. Yeah, you can, right? I mean, that could take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. The SNAT is in the equation. It could take, I don't know, an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half. If 1 minute of downtime is, I don't know, $50,000 or $1 million, that could add up really quickly, right? So what happened was, remember, there was no war room. There was no issue. We proactively realized, hey, all we got to do is add a metadata pointer to the alert, and we fixed the problem. Nobody was worried about being blamed. Nobody was worried. The system was never really down. We were able to proactively verify some of these things did not really work the way we thought they did. Turn around and have adequate time to remediate and fix it before the real world was on fire. So that's the key value of this stuff is being proactive in verifying these things. So that's in essence that's the example of PortSlinger. More than happy to answer any questions anyone has via Twitter or via Q&A. But here is the link to download. That's Kelly Shortridge at the top there, and that's me, and that's what the port looks like. For the first 500 people who complete that Typeform form, we'll get that includes us to be able to get your address information to ship you the book, but we'll get you a print copy of the book, and so. So in summary, it's about learning. It's about learning to navigate complexity and build confidence in our security. The next steps would be that I recommend is pick up a copy of the report, go through it. It'll give you sort of the necessary bits you need to get started. You'll be able to see use cases from Capital One, Cardinal Health, United Health Group, and in the bigger book, there's going to be a good 12 to 15 other case studies that you'll get a lot of value from. And I'll leave you with the last thing would be one is thank you for taking the time to view my session, but also remember, stop looking for better answers and start asking better questions. That comes from John Allspaw, who is one of the creators of DevOps, as well as resilience engineering in the world of software. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article about Git for the mainframe. Software delivery modernization should be done with care, especially with mission-critical mainframe applications. But for some, modernization will feel like a trip back to the future. Mainframe applications are typically systems of record with high-value transactions, significant compliance risks, and an essential need for stability and security. They've been running reliably, often for decades, with code changes made by teams of dedicated developers using time-tested interfaces like ISPF or green screens and Eclipse integrated with mainframe-based source management tools. But three primary drivers of change are forcing the conversation around modernizing mainframe apps. This article looks at each of those three and the role that Git can play in helping ease the complexity of modernizing mainframe apps. And we look at libpf or libbpf and BCC for BPF development. If you're into Linux development, you've probably heard BPF mentioned over the last few years. BPF stands for Berkeley Packet Filter, and the technology has many use cases. BPF apps can get deep access into an operating system and enable you to perform tasks such as high-performance load balancing, DDoS mitigation, and more, simply and easily. LibBPF and BCC tools are both sets of tools to help with BPF development. However, both of these have their own strengths and weaknesses. This article details the two tool collections to help you understand when to use them. All right, in news, a research from testing platform provider Applause found functional bugs accounted for 68% of issues within applications. The data was gathered from 13,000 mobile devices and 1,000 unique desktops running 500 versions of operating systems, and found that the majority of issues could be traced to functional bugs, compared to visual, content, crashes, and lags and latency issues, which collectively comprise 32% of issues. The report also found screen readers comprised 66% of all accessibility bugs, compared to keyboard navigation issues and insufficient color contrast, which accounted for only 12%. In terms of localization, poor and missing translations account for more than 2/3 of bugs. Based on ongoing feedback data that Applause also continuously collects from customers, nearly half of organizations identified currency and number formatting as the most valuable bugs to identify when it came to localization. Overall, organizations ranked the discovery of crashes at 75%, functional bugs at 61%, and lag and latency issues at 53% as exceptionally valuable. On Container Journal, we have a list of 4 service proxy projects from the CNCF. This is the latest in an ongoing inventory of useful technologies sponsored by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Standardizing communication between various apps and servers is paramount in our world of connected software. To manage traffic in a scalable way, software systems typically deploy a service proxy as a back-end utility that sits between software components. A service proxy intercepts traffic and applies logic before forwarding the request to another application or server. Nowadays, service proxies are foundational components of inter-service communication within large cloud-native software infrastructure. This article dives into some proxies that fall under the CNCF umbrella, including proxies and load balancers that provide ingress features, and most of which are Kubernetes native. And we look at the conundrum of container native versus container ready storage. Containers help dynamically develop, deploy, manage, and test apps in various environments, from a developer's laptop to the cloud or an on-site data center. Containers are now mainstream and have proven reliable for allowing developers to design cloud apps fast and at scale. Organizations using containers have inevitably been faced with the choice of using container native or container ready storage. But what are the differences and which one is the best choice? This article compares the two container data services layers side by side to help clear the confusion on the best storage solution for an organization's needs. Good stuff. All right, over on Security Boulevard, Motorola Solutions has created a Public Safety Threat Alliance, a cyber threat intelligence sharing hub aimed at improving public safety in the community. The Alliance is a CISA-recognized information sharing and analysis organization solely dedicated to facilitating information and intelligence sharing on cyber threats to public safety. ISAOs allow for pooling resources so many organizations can spend little money or resources and receive outside work product as a result. They bring unparalleled value to their community by creating a forum for their members, public, private, and nonprofit organizations, to share information with each other about the cyber threats, cyber attacks, and the techniques and tactics in use by bad actors against their community. The information sharing component is critical because the ISAO takes the various types of information from myriad sources and transforms it into actionable intelligence that members can use to improve the collective cybersecurity posture of the ISAO's members. The Public Safety Threat Alliance's dedicated public safety-focused analysts will draw from a wide variety of intelligence products and feeds from public, private, and nonprofit organizations to create that actionable intelligence. And finally, we have 5 security lessons learned from the Lapsus attacks. With the Lapsus hacking group back in business following the arrest of key members by London police, organizations need to take a closer look at the tactics this group used to pull off a remarkable string of breaches at major organizations. As this group has shown, even basic techniques can be extremely effective at penetrating large organizations by focusing on low-hanging fruit. Their proven effectiveness is likely to result in similar attacks by other criminal actors. Lapsus does not appear to use custom malware or novel techniques. Instead, the group is relying on commodity tools and social engineering tactics, but using them in creative ways. For instance, the group has been very effective at targeting peripheral users to gain their initial foothold into a company's network. They also use privilege escalation tactics quite effectively and go beyond email to exploit other communications channels such as Slack, where it is easier to social engineer employees, find sensitive information, and to escalate the attack. Based on these findings, this article outlines 5 Lapsus tactics that companies need to prepare for. All right, that's it for the headlines. Please check back with me on Monday when I'll have a new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Rick Longenecker, who is the CISO over at Open Systems. Rick, thank you so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Charlene. Really looking forward to it. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with Techstrong TV.
All right, great. Thank you. So I would like to talk to you about cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and the way organizations are kind of drowning these days. But before we get started with that, I was wondering if you can introduce us to Open Systems.
So my name is Rick Longenecker. I'm the CISO for a company named Open Systems. We're a security and networking provider based in Europe and also in Redwood City, California, pretty rapidly growing. What we do is, for the last 30 years, we've been focused on what's called SD-WAN or connectivity globally. We were one of the pioneers there, which has now been termed as SASE by Gartner. But I'm really, really excited about our new business. We've really focused up and partnered with Microsoft on what's called managed detection and response, or essentially security services for the Fortune 5000, you could say. So we work in manufacturing, healthcare, education has been a real growing area, and we cover 180 plus companies globally with employees from all over the world. So it's a real pleasure to be here today.
All right. Yeah, I remember Open Systems from the SD-WAN days and in the networking space. So, but cybersecurity is actually yeah, if you think about the ST software defined networking, I mean that's a huge there's a huge security element to that also, which is kind of a natural progression for open systems to kind of move into this space. So congratulations to Open Systems for attacking this area that is it's a hard nut to crack sometimes. But we do want to talk to you about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, because it seems like we hear a lot about artificial intelligence and AI and machine learning in cybersecurity. And these days it seems to be table stakes, but I wonder if it's really doing a lot of good for cybersecurity. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of things that AI and machine learning can do in cybersecurity and is doing to help kind of elevate the security posture of organizations. But, how much are we looking at these days that's quite literally still a kind of a catchphrase or a buzzword that within with cybersecurity companies? I mean, how prevalent is AI really, real AI, and how is it really helping organizations?
Well, AI or essentially machine learning or automated machine learning, you could say, is taking off. Of course, one of our acquisitions in the last year, as we really went into the cybersecurity space headstrong, as part of our managed detection and response services, was the acquisition of a data science company. And basically, cyber today is really based on activity. There's a huge amount of data. I mean, you can no longer run a security operations center or do other security activities without being able to handle huge quantities of data. I mean, if you even look at remote work and other things, the amount of different data sources and different scenarios that can happen to different users over time generates a lot of data. And the only way to handle data smartly is one from an infrastructure perspective, but really from the machine learning or AI perspective. And what we're seeing from the attackers is, of course, a lot of open source libraries now that essentially enable, you could say, the common script kiddie to start to really utilize this stuff. You're seeing it on an information level perspective, in terms of, fake media and other things, but it also can be used to automate and implement different types of attacks. Although, you got a little bit before, there is a lot of talk in the industry about AI or ML and what its impacts are. There's some cases, like in every area of technology, that maybe doesn't live up to its promises, but there's other areas where it's been intensely useful. One of the ways that we work through this is that we do apply ML and you could say AI, to how we handle different types of data sources. We did work for a while, and we still pursue our own algorithm for understanding if a mail is phishing, which we use as a secondary source outside of products we do from other companies that integrate things. We also use it for domain verification, right? A lot of attacks might come from domains that are kind of questionable. You can take traditional sources like Whois and domain tools and other things to find a reputation of other services, but we also try to automate that in terms of our operations. The true use for all this stuff down the line is with our MDR service. Essentially, we're augmenting most organizations. We're the type of organization, and that we believe that this is very strongly, as does Microsoft, that over time, there's a practical aspect to security, and essentially, companies can no longer handle what script kiddies or other groups are throwing at them, or do security operations themselves. So essentially, we offset different companies' security teams, enabling them to focus on their own problems. And then we have, of course, outsourced operations that we augment your teams. And part of that, again, of course, is working with ML and AI in order to make our operations a bit more efficient and automated. But there's still a huge aspect of this across the board that needs people. So it's not a solution in its own.
Yeah. So that that actually kind of speaks to the crux of my question, which is, are we relying too much on AI and ML? I mean, are you seeing organizations just kind of flipping the switch and saying, all right, well, we got AI, we got ML, we don't need to worry about it anymore. We'll just go let the systems run, and we'll just go about our business. Because it seems like a lot of things that are happening these days with respect to cybersecurity, a lot of the breaches that happen are happening for some really kind of stupid reasons.
So I've been in the game about 15 years. I helped set up the security program at the UN. I was a CISO at a big alarm company. So we had a lot of cameras and alarms everywhere, all over Europe and South America, a bit like ADT, if you're familiar in the States.
Yep.
And, we've got a lot of, banking, manufacturing, other customers. And basically, security still boils down to the fundamentals. Nothing's changed in the last 15 years. I think, Charlene, it's still fundamentals.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are some organizations out there that might buy the newest, flashiest product and think that they're protected. And in the end, they're not, because usually the way AI works, or some sort of machine learning, is that it looks at things and it generates alerts. And nobody ever turns on, block this function based on some algorithm or something, because, half the time it could be wrong and you could cause a lot of problems. And in the end, what they do is they essentially come to the conclusion that they need help or somebody to actually look at those alerts and actually act on them. And a lot of those AI and ML tools are very, very helpful in order to make more defined alerts, or to flag something that you might have not otherwise already seen. But in the end, it's still an operational endeavor, right? That you're going to have to understand how it fits in your organization. And any organization today, and I don't think there's actually too many of them now that are simply relying on external tools and just turning them on. I think pretty much everybody's come to the realization that it's still, they must have their own programs or partners, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And especially over the course of the last couple of years, with so many things changing with respect to the way people work, where they work, the systems that they're using these days, the infrastructure has shifted even more to cloud. They're just, it is certainly, it's a sea change from 2 years ago, when, most workers were still in an office. And I would say the security team had a much better handle on what was happening within the organization from a security perspective and protection. It kind of became the Wild West for a while, when everybody was sent home, and we, really weren't keeping track, or as good track as maybe we should have, when it came to cybersecurity controls and locking down systems, and just knowing where the employees were, what sites they were using and things of that nature. So it's a much different landscape today. So I can understand why organizations are increasingly relying on tools that are infused with AI and ML to help them, particularly since we're not going back to an all on-premises work environment, perhaps ever again. I mean, I work in an office, but I kind of have to a lot of the time. So I just,
well, you
for
see
me, it's
like I'm at home in Luzerne, Switzerland. So I mean, basically,
there you go.
I mean, it's been wonderful. I think there was just an article that New York is, people are planning a 49%. It was in Forbes or something, 49% utilization in the office, right? Even in New York, and downtown's going to. The residency is going to go down. I think what we've really found, and why we partner with Microsoft, and a lot of organizations are doing this, is basically in order to support remote work. I mean, cloud tools, whether it's Microsoft, Google, Zoom, et cetera, have had a huge utilization, and at the same time, open up a lot of different gaps. And, with Microsoft's, for instance, I mean, it's almost in every organization, where the SharePoint, email, et cetera, a lot of confidential information in there. A lot of interesting stuff that can happen with remote access to that, or lack of monitoring around that. And if you talk about ML and AI, the different providers have really, and I stress Microsoft because we work with them, and most organizations we find do, they've really developed a lot of different tools within their platforms that incorporate ML and AI that give you those alerts, that give you that what's called Superman. So, for instance, if one person's logged into one place and and then all of a sudden there's a login from another place, that essentially you've got this alert that tells you that somebody is something's happening that maybe isn't physically possible, right? And these sorts of alerts and that sort of, you could say, practical ML/AI isn't necessarily harnessed. It's available to most organizations when they buy different subscriptions and different protections, but it's not necessarily harnessed. It's not harnessed operationally. It's not necessarily understood, but there's actually a lot of hidden value there, right? And that's definitely something that we see more and more organizations asking for, wanting, and working through in order to kind of control their security posture and do it in a way that's not very visible to their users. Right, not a lot of extra tools on their desktop or other things. It's built into the platform that they already use, and that's definitely a practical approach. Yeah, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does, and I would imagine that as time is going on, also with this sea change regarding the way we're working and the way people are interfacing with technology, that education is becoming or has become paramount. And I think a lot more organizations are recognizing that now. Yeah. And I think it would be great if we could figure out some way of utilizing AI and ML in furthering cybersecurity education. I'm not sure how well that is today, whether we're actually doing it, but it seems to me that would be kind of a natural place for it. Just my two cents.
Yeah, that's Charlie. It's true. I guess, I mean, in terms of education, I think the very first thing is it's here. I mean, it's kind of like quantum computing, everything else. It's a brave new world. I mean, things are happening. I mean, we have the metaverse now, which everybody talks about, being the next big security risk, right? But I mean, first off, in terms of AI, we're still trying to understand it. There was a highly respected security kind of leader, I guess you can say, that I met one time in Israel, right, and keep up dialogue with. I think he was working for Citibank and one of the major banks at the time as kind of their lead kind of security visionary or thought leader, you could say. And he drew just a slide, but handwritten it, and he basically put like a black box in the middle and it was representing something that runs on AI, right? And essentially, you feed something out, and you feed something in, and then something else comes out, and you don't necessarily know what happens inside of it. And this is essentially what we're doing. We're training all these models. We're using machine learning. We're enabling different types of functions and in ways that we don't fully understand. And that has security implications, right? And many security practitioners still need to continue on the fundamentals because it's always about fundamentals. But in the end, this is coming, this is here. The implications aren't quite known, and it definitely has to be incorporated from an educational perspective. And whether that's gamification of attack and response and other things, or understanding of what developers are doing with it and the risks that it presents over time, either from an attacker perspective, internal, et cetera. So, it's definitely very, very relevant.
Yeah, great. So, I hesitate to ask, but what do you see happening on the horizon with respect to cybersecurity and just kind of the way organizations are ingesting cybersecurity and utilizing it on a daily and even kind of minute by minute basis?
Well, I think it's continued evolution of kind of what we've seen for a decade. I think it's a little bit of a theme here, right? There's new technologies, but it's still a bit of the fundamentals. I think the next couple of years, why we're in the business of operations and doing MDRs, because pretty much every organization's at risk now, and they can't do it themselves. And quite frankly, operation of security and continual protection, it's hard. It's not an easy thing. So that's going to be a continuing trend. I think from the other end too, we'll continue to see a growth of the platform-based security, you could say, like Microsoft, Cisco, all the other ones, where we have these very large platforms that people work in. And I think the dynamic in the landscape is going to change. I think if you talk about geopolitics, another thing, I think cyber is only going to take a stronger implication in our daily lives, you could say, in terms of the potential for cyber to affect everyone in their daily life. So it's a brave new world, right? And we just keep going into it. Yeah.
Well, I hope that we do it a lot more safely moving forward, although, things change daily, almost hourly. So it's very, very difficult to herd those cats. So, but Rick, thank you so much for taking some time and sharing your perspective on cybersecurity and AI. And congratulations again for Open Systems kind of cracking the cybersecurity nut. So good stuff there.
Well, thank you, Charlene, and really appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
You bet. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with a webinars preview. I always tell you about all of the great webinars that we have coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Too many to tell you about in these webinar preview things that I do, but hopefully you'll be able to check out the full lineup and register for a couple too. Hopefully. All right. First one is called Chaos Engineering for DevOps. This one is happening Tuesday, May 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is sponsored by Sumo Logic, partnered with AWS. DevOps is all about safe experimentation, failing fast, and continuous feedback loops. Chaos engineering is all about purposefully triggering a software failure in production to build confidence and resilience. So how can DevOps teams leverage chaos engineering to deliver better customer experiences? This webinar will cover how chaos engineering can uncover failure before it impacts customers, how to get all teams on board and comfortable with chaos, and using chaos engineering to train teams and improve individual team and technology performance. That's going to be a good one, folks. The second one is called Applying the 2022 OSSRA Findings to Software Supply Chain Risk Management. This one is happening Tuesday, May 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It is sponsored by Synopsys. According to the 2022 Open Source Security and Risk Analysis, or OSSRA report, the overwhelming majority of software development organizations are leveraging open source to build their applications. However, the scale of use creates a growing management challenge. While development and risk management teams scramble to patch vulnerabilities, decipher complex license terms, governing obligations associated with the use of each open source component, and stay up to date with component versions, that's a lot to do. Another consideration begs attention. How does this open source risk affect my software supply chain? So in this webinar, we're going to be discussing what a software supply chain looks like, how open source introduces risk into a software supply chain, and applying the OSSRA findings to reduce your software supply chain risk. Another good one. All right, the last one is called Shift Left Done Right. This one is happening Wednesday, May 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Checkpoint. In today's world, all major processes are automated. Coding, build, testing, monitoring, deployment, and the compute layer. Servers come and go, and storage is allocated within minutes. The sheer complexity of keeping up with the pace of the entire software development lifecycle requires us to come up with a technology that can tame the complexity of security in such a rapidly changing tech world and enable more people to become security experts. So in this webinar, we will discuss how organizations can shift security left while also making it technologically accessible. That's going to be an interesting one as well. That is the previews for the webinars for Thursday. I'll be back on Monday with a brand new batch. Until then, I hope you have a great weekend. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back. Rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we've got The View with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Small Step Labs CEO Mike Malone. Then they talk about the company's recent round of funding, $26 million, and how the company is planning on using that to automate certificate management using open source tooling. Good stuff. It's a great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Mike Malone, who's CEO for Small Step Labs. They just raised $26 million to automate the management of certificates. Mike, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Explain, if you would, your approach to this issue, and explain also to me how it is. What year is this, 2022, and we're still trying to figure out how to manage certificates? What's wrong with us?
Good question. Well, I mean, yeah, certificates are some of the oldest security technologies on the internet. You know, the X509 standard dates back to pre-web. It was a telecommunications standard. I think they're broadly useful when you're talking about certificates in general. It's maybe a little bit too vague. So why are we still solving problems around that? I think because the rest of the world has changed and we're still using certificates for the same reason we're using passwords. Like, you know, they have their problems, but they also solve a problem in a diverse set of different scenarios. And I think what we're doing differently is we're bringing new capabilities around certificate management to address more modern needs in the sort of DevOps, cloud native, agile, CI/CD, heavily automated distributed system space.
So when we get to the point where a website or an app just doesn't suddenly keel over because somebody forgot to renew the certificate because it's all automated within the process of the DevOps workflow?
That is the goal. People don't manage certificates anymore. Computers manage them for themselves.
Well, that sounds pretty nice. What makes that possible? I mean, we've been at this forever, so what's changed?
Well, I think there's more of a desire now as systems have grown from small monolithic systems to these larger microservice systems, and practices like agile and stuff. Sort of things are moving more quickly, necessitates more use of certs. I think, there's some new protocols that are helpful. One of the most popular features of our open source toolchain, I guess I should mention, We are open core, so our core certificate management infrastructure is open source. And one of the most popular features of our open source and of our product is that we implement this protocol called ACME, ACME, that was developed originally, I think it's under IETF, but by Let's Encrypt. If you've heard of Let's Encrypt, they issue certificates for websites. So it's protocols like that and standardization efforts that are addressing the needs of these automation scenarios that are really helping.
Will the usage of certificates get more granular? Or are we going to start attaching them to smaller and smaller artifacts? Like we see microservices everywhere, and each of these things, it has an identity of its own. So does it get a certificate?
That's what we're seeing. Certificates have some properties that make them really amenable to identifying components of a distributed system. Once they're issued, they're peer-to-peer. There's no central authority that needs to be referenced sort of over the network in order to validate a certificate, which is nice. It's scalable, and it's efficient and low latency and all that good stuff. So yeah, as the industry moves towards zero trust, and shift left and like all of those things, and sort of with self-contained applications, those self-contained components need to be able to authenticate to one another. And with our tool chain, we see certificates as a very good way of doing that.
Will the cost of certificates then come down? Because I think one of the issues that people had over the years is there were certificate authorities, but they had different tiers of service. And as you went along, it got more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have come down and will continue to come down. One thing that we've done that's been a little bit tricky actually in our pricing model for our product is that we don't actually charge per certificate. We charge per endpoint, which is what we call just a thing that needs a certificate. The goal being you should pay us the same amount whether you're issuing one-year certificate or 365 one-day certificates. Either way, you're sort of authenticating some entity for a duration of time, and that's the unit of value, and that's what we want to be charging you for.
Mm-hmm. As we go along, how does it occur to someone to integrate certificate management into the DevOps workflow? And I ask the question because there's so many gates and so many other things you got to add to that as it is. So what does it take to kind of get somebody to have this aha moment and say, we should add this to that process?
Well, in my experience, I think it's when you start paying attention to security. And I have a background in startups, and I'll be honest, like a small startup, security probably isn't your first priority. And that's reasonable because rationally, it doesn't make sense to spend more to secure something than the value of that thing that you're securing. And security isn't free. Our goal, however, is to make it as low cost and as easy to use as possible. And the way we feel is that like a good public key infrastructure does a thing that you cannot do any other way. It gives you a new capability, and it's useful. It's broadly useful. And everybody deserves to have a tool that that can do this, that can achieve these goals. So we're working to make it cost effective and correct to integrate this sort of tooling earlier and earlier in the software lifecycle.
What is your sense of the awareness or adoption of quote unquote DevSecOps best practices? We hear people talking a lot about that, but it's not quite clear that people are down that path. And I'm kind of assuming that certificate management is part of that conversation. So where are we on that journey in our relative maturity?
That's a tough one to answer. The phrase DevSecOps is hard to even define. I think there is an increasing awareness. I mean, there are things around that. There's an economy there that is growing. I think products like Sneak and there's an awareness of sort of software supply chain issues that need to be addressed. And I like to think we are part of that sort of economy. One thing that has to happen is the tools need to become more approachable, which I think is part of what is happening. It's interesting with cryptography. It's one of the few areas of computer science where practitioners are told not to learn it, basically. Don't roll your own crypto is something that software engineers say to one another regularly. You don't say that about anything else. And a lot of people learn by doing. So I think there's a tooling gap that is being filled that is helping make this stuff more approachable in the sort of DevOps cloud native world. So it's proliferating, but I think it's still early.
Mm-hmm. I think we all in our career have had some experience with, I like to call that Homer Simpson Doe moment, where the certificate expires and suddenly something's not available. And we spend a while trying to figure out what the cause of that was, because we always think it's something more complex till somebody figures out it was a certificate. Are we close to not having that moment? Is that going to be something we laugh about in the past, or is it going to be still with us for a long time?
If you do things right today, I think you can eliminate that moment. So, and the way you do it is the same way you do a lot of other things in the automation space. We like short-lived certificates. How short-lived sort of depends on your functional and non-functional requirements and what your environment looks like. But man, go as short as you can. There are security benefits to that, and there are operational benefits to that. It forces you then to automate. Right? If you're issuing a certificate that lasts a year, you can get away with manually rotating it, and you're going to forget because you're human. If you're issuing certificates that last an hour, you've got to automate it, or 5 minutes. And then you got to instrument your automation so you notice when things fail. And when you're rolling things out, you'll probably have some hiccups. But one of the sort of tenets of DevOps and CI/CD is organizations get better at things that they do a lot of. So if you're rotating a lot of certificates frequently, you're going to get good at it, and they're going to stop failing. And we've built all of the tooling to do that automation and to notice if something's going sideways. So yeah, we're seeing our customers get very good at issuing short-lived certificates that are automatically renewed and keeping those systems up.
All right. Well, hopefully certificates will be one less thing we have to worry about going forward. Hey, Mike, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, that wraps up another Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's conversations and presentations as much as I enjoyed bringing them to you. Quick reminder, we've got Initech Dallas coming up next week. I will be out there at the Irving Convention Center there on May 11th for the day-long event. Be doing some live streaming from the event, as well as doing a couple interviews as well live, which we will have on Techstrong TV on that day, Wednesday, May 11th. Hope you can join me in Dallas. If you can't, please do check us out on the live stream Wednesday. If you can, please do stop and say hello. We're going to be set up in the expo hall doing our live stream. So looking forward to that, looking forward to seeing everybody. And before then though, we will have a new broadcast of Techstrong TV on Monday. So hopefully you will be able to join us then. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and please do whatever you do, stay safe.